And I think a lot of us do have that moment where we say, how in the world can I mother my children well and be a good wife to my husband and honor the Lord as I need to and be a good worker and have all of these, tasks and obligations at work?
Welcome to Book Therapy. I'm your host, Kim Patton. There's no way to count how many books are floating around in this world. Some are decent, some are truly terrible, and some are great. Today we're going to take a deep dive into one great book. Together we will discover gems of truth and encouragement to help you face your current season of life. I'm ready, you're ready, let's get this party started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Book Therapy. Today we are finishing up part 2 of my conversation with Charity Gibson. If you haven't listened to part 1, it is the previous episode. Once again, I am so sad to say goodbye to you all for the summer, but I'll be back before you know it, and you probably need a break from me anyways. And there are plenty of book therapy episodes to catch up on over the summer, so you won't miss a thing. All right, enjoy the show. The next thing we're going to talk about is managing stress, which is a big deal because when you are juggling home life, work life, family life, career aspirations, and your own internal monologue, it can be very stressful. You talk about being pregnant with your third child and being called into your office on campus, and they told you, it doesn't seem like you want to be here. And when you responded that you did want to be there, it felt both like a truth and a lie. You felt torn about whether what you were doing was the right thing or something you could even be able to do. I'm sorry if that's a painful memory. That sounds like a loaded situation. So as we talk about managing stress, bring me back to that day, that moment, that season of your life when you were bringing a third child into this world, and that would not be your last, and you were confronted by your supervisor.
Yeah. I mean, that even choosing to write about that in the book really was a big question for me, a big debate. And I decided to be vulnerable and include it because I think the readers of the book needed to see this is something I've actually struggled with. It hasn't always been easy. And I think a lot of us do have that moment where we say, how in the world can I mother my children well and be a good wife to my husband and honor the Lord as I need to and be a good worker and have all of these, tasks and obligations at work? And so at that time in my life, I did largely still see motherhood as an ultimate calling as opposed to a role. And so I was struggling, if this is my ultimate calling, what am I doing spending any time away from home? How do I pour into this one calling when I'm also doing other things? And so it was really learning that whatever our hand finds to do, whatever opportunities the Lord gives us, that idea that we can be superwoman and do it all amazing might not be accurate. I would say it's probably not a recognition of our limitation as human beings. But I no longer count the number of hours that I'm away from my kids and feel guilty about it, like I did at that stage in my life. I prioritize time with my children, and I make sure that I do have boundaries of working hours and family time. But I really do have a peace now in seeing that God has equipped me with certain skills that I'm able to use as a professor. And I actually see a lot of ways that my mom skills, as I like to call them, the organization or the desire to give fun experiences, that is something I'm able to bring to my college students to serve them. So I am grateful for the ways that my employer was kind of gracious and willing to walk with me through that time where I was figuring out, how do I do both? There's not exactly a blueprint. But also, I think we have to be willing to have the conversation that um, it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to bring up the fact that, you know what, there were some sticky moments, there were some painful moments, as opposed to women kind of on their own feeling shame that they're not performing however they feel they should be in either realm, whether it's home or at work.
Yeah, I remember talking to the mom of the children that I was nannying, and she was one of the first women that I saw working full time. I mean, I was the nanny, so I saw her leave for work in the morning, and I wanted to pick her brain a little bit about what that experience was like. And she said something that has stuck with me for 15 years. She said, I don't feel like I'm doing either of them great. I feel like there's always ways that I can be a better mom, and there's always ways I can be a better employee. And one night she had like a project, and she was texting me, hey, can you stay late? Can you stay late? And I was practicing boundaries myself. And so I was kind of testing the waters of like, you know what? I don't want to stay late. I'm going to be back here at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I want to go home and eat dinner with my husband and relax a little bit before I have to come back and, take care of the kids. So I said no. And she texted back, well, is there anything else you have to do tonight? And I knew that just because I didn't have anything else that I had to do, I could still say no. It was within my power, I guess you would say. I think she made other arrangements, or she came home maybe like a half hour late or something instead of the original like 2 hours. And I just left and felt awful the whole evening. I just felt awful. I was like, she hates me. She probably is so mad that I couldn't stay and cover for her while she was at work. And I got up the next morning and I prayed and I went to work and I said, hey, I'm really sorry about last night. I feel bad that I put you in that position to whatever. And she's like, oh, it's fine. It's not on you at all. This is just what I have to do. I have to make hard decisions sometimes. And yeah, things are crazy at work, but we'll handle it, and don't worry about it. And I felt so much better that I had stuck to my boundaries, but at the same time, I felt bad for her because that was one example, where the situation got sticky. You brought up a lot of really practical things. I believe in like the second half of the book, I felt like it was so many good little tidbits of practical things that you do for your family. For example, on page 65, you talk about the sound of a mother's voice and how powerful that is. And you talk about reading aloud with them and how kids know when we are stressed. And so there's all these components to you being your full self at home with your children. And the sound of your voice is soothing to them. It calms them down automatically. And they know when we are stressed. And so when we are feeling and our voice gets kind of tense, they can feel that and they feed off of what we're putting out. I think of my daughter. We were watching a show the other day, and I don't know, I was really grossed out. I think it was like the teenagers were watching how these guys on YouTube just eat weird things, like put sriracha sauce in Skittles, and
Oh.
I was just like, ah! And my daughter, she kept looking back at me. She kept peering at my expression to see how I was reacting. And then she would figure out how she was going to react based on me. And so I said, Eden, what do you think about that? Or is that weird? Or do you like that? Or would you want to try that? I tried to involve her to show that, hey, girl, you can have your own opinions too. You don't have to just go off of me. So talk to me about how we're managing stress with our children and how we can kind of, I don't want to say separate work and home because that's not what we're trying to do, but how do you, I guess, manage your own responsibilities and try not to bring your children into the adult world of, stress and project management and all the tasks you have to complete.
Yeah, I love that example you gave of your daughter looking at you because you're setting the tone. And it's so funny that you mentioned that because one thing that we share in common, I don't think I've told you this, I have a daughter named Eden also. And I have such a similar story, except it's with reading, where sometimes instead of looking at the picture book, she's just looking up at me. And it is just this precious example of the way they are looking at us to set the tone. And so when thinking about managing stress, I often hear the word balance used, and sometimes I use it myself, especially thinking about managing home and work. But balance kind of gets us thinking about a scale, and you've got to exactly make things the same on both sides in order for it to work. And that isn't always accurate in thinking about these two things. Sometimes I have a heavy week at work, and it takes a little bit more. Overall, I try to make sure there's ample things going on at home, and there's times where there's more going on at home, and that takes a little more. And so I really think the word harmony or trying to harmonize the roles, and if you think about an orchestra, not every instrument has the melody, or they're not all playing the same notes at the same time. I've found that to be really useful in managing stress. That on my calendar at home, I kind of write down the non negotiables with work. I think about what grading do I have this week? Is there an event I need to go back on campus for in the evening? Things like that. And then from that framework, I will plan maybe our family outing for the month or the chore day and try to make sure they're not happening at the same time. And again, it doesn't always completely work that way, but I found thinking about that idea of harmonizing the roles that it might not always be a complete balancing act. It might lean heavy on one side, but as long as that's a season and that is not what has become normative, then it's something where we can kind of adjust as we need to moving forward. And I also just try to teach my kids that we don't want to live in that fast paced, stress induced environment. I do feel that sometimes there is stress that some of it is just part of the job, whatever job I'm talking about, either being a mom or being a worker. But then there's things that I pursue on my own. Um, and I've learned as an adult how to manage some of that. But kids are still learning, and so I really try to keep their schedule as free as possible. I try not to have an extracurricular every night or something planned every weekend because for me, part of homemaking is just purposing to be home together. And the reality is we spend less time at home than families where the mom is home full time. And so those families, maybe it works for them to be busier in the evenings because they're getting some of that quality time during the day. But for us, since we are apart during the day, man, that evening and weekend time is really sacred. And I really try to protect it, even from fun things. So we have to say no to birthday parties that they're invited to sometimes. I say no to social things because we can only do so much. We're not superwoman, and that is just having humility to recognize human limitation. And I think having our kids see that can start modeling for them how they'll go on to live their lives as adults. And my oldest daughter recently set a boundary for herself. She was invited to something, and I was actually going to do what I needed to do to make it work for her. And she said, "Mom, it's just too much. It's okay. I'm okay with missing out on that because I want our family to have a more peaceful evening." And that was a sweet moment.
Yeah, she's learning from you. That's really beautiful. I think of the library setup and how one time I saw something online where they have kind of cubicles, I guess, not really cubicles, but a computer and a desk area, and then built right next to it is like a little playpen that is built in with the toys, and you could have a parent working on their own personal stuff while their child is literally right next to them. And it only works for kids that are less than 18 months old, maybe. But I thought that was a beautiful picture of how sometimes you can incorporate both things together. I didn't ever find it very easy to work on my computer when I was raising the babies, because I couldn't concentrate. They were touching everything, and so I wasn't able to write on my computer while I was momming. So I saved that all for nap time. And when they were babies, I had a lot of nap time. Every day I had at least one solid 2-hour chunk. And that is what I did for years, is I held that nap time sacred so that I could work on my own personal things. But there is this bring your kid to work kind of thing. Not everybody can do that, but I like how we can normalize, hey, like my kid is in the back working on homework while I'm running the cash register or something. And if they're old enough, you can take them with you. And our job is extremely family friendly because they're with us all the time. If they're not at preschool, they are with us in the house, and we have to talk to the teenagers about their language occasionally because we've got a 3 and a 5-year-old running down the halls, and they can't watch their favorite shows if it includes things that I don't want my kids to be exposed to. So in some cases, the work and the kids can be combined, I would say, but that also brings a lot of stress that you have to manage when your two worlds collide.
Yes, I remember in some of those earlier years when it was just my oldest daughter, she was a baby, and I would do a lot of my lesson planning from home. And it took forever because I was so interrupted. But for me, the idea was I need to be physically present with her as much as possible. And as you mentioned, that works well for some people. But what I've learned about myself and the grace that I've given myself over the years, my youngest spends a little bit more time in daycare than my oldest, which allows me to do the planning and the prepping. So then the time that I spend with them is for them, and I'm not being pulled in both of those directions. But at first, I didn't really give myself the liberty to say, okay, am I really working efficiently and effectively? Or am I just doing it this way because I'm kind of being motivated by guilt? Well, I shouldn't be away from her, even if she's napping half the time. I should be physically in the house. And again, I've kind of learned it's to me, it's very much so about the quality of time that I want to spend with them, as well as the quantity of it. And so that looks, I think you're right, it looks different for different people, depending on how well they multitask, as well as the nature of their work, and maybe how much intense focus they have to give to whatever that task is. So yeah, I think moms just have to really pay attention to themselves and what's my working style, what's my learning style, what's my personality, and how does this all work with my kids' personality? How well can they play independently? Can they read quietly, or do they always need that interaction with me?
Okay, lastly, we're going to talk about community parenting, which we already kind of touched on. One of your best lines of the book is the comparison game never fulfills. You talk about not having guilt and how our home life shouldn't be our whole life, but the center of it. And with homemaking, I think that that's a good point. If we are working and we're not home all the time, our home and our homemaking can still be the center, and things can beautifully flourish out of that fortress of rest and relaxation and comfort and silliness because it's our home base. How in the world do you not let comparison get the best of you? And how in the world do you overcome guilt?
So, first of all, disclaimer that, I'm still in process. So, I think I've gotten a lot better at not holding myself to the standard of how someone else's life looks from the outside, from my limited vantage point of that. And I can look at that either way. Look at someone who's just being a wonderful mom, or someone who's really just being a great teacher. And again, kind of holding myself to both of those bars simultaneously. And I've just really tried to learn to capitalize on what has God gifted me in. What are the things that I'm able to bring to my home? And, I've realized that for me, kind of that cultivation of the relationships and spending that time, especially one-on-one time with my kids, is one of the ways that I'm able to help our home flourish. But I can get intimidated when I compare myself to someone who's a wonderful cook or interior designer or those other things connected with homemaking, in which, I feel like I'm not going to measure up if it's a competition. And so, really, in writing the book, I sort of did affirm myself, okay, this is what you bring to the table. And certainly, I still have room to grow in these other areas. But it's kind of interesting how much attention we are often prompted to give to the things we need to work on. And we give very little attention to the things we're already doing well. And certainly we need to know what we should improve on. But knowing what we do well, that's really an opportunity to expound on that and to really cultivate that rather than just focusing, okay, I need to grow in this area. And so, coming back to comparison, I do try to use that. Okay, if I see somebody else doing something well and I feel like I'm not quite there, that's an opportunity to grow. But what have people spoken into me that they see me doing well? And do I allow myself to believe them? Do I allow myself to try to continue doing that rather than just putting all my energy into the thing that I don't do quite as well? There's going to be some mom guilt or even dad guilt. And I think it's finding that catch 22 where we don't berate ourselves for things and that we show ourselves grace, but we don't let that be an excuse for being mediocre or for not trying to get better. And so I think, is there ever any time and place to feel guilt? I mean, if I yelled at my kids, then maybe, there probably was another way to handle it than raising my voice at them. But that's not something to be bogged down by. I mean, I should go apologize to them, do better next time, and move on. So I think it's just not letting ourselves wallow in that guilt and also just recognizing there's probably good things going on as well. And if we just fixate on those things we're feeling guilty about, we're probably missing some of the things that actually are going pretty well.
Thank you, Charity, so much for putting in all of the time and effort to write this book. I felt seen as a working mama who's just trying to, do my best in both places, at work and at home, and with my family and with the people that I work with. So you did a great job.
Well, thank you. That means so much. Just hearing that you did feel seen, that was my prayer. So thanks for saying that.
Okay, we have to wrap this up. So can you let everybody know where they can find you online?
Yes. So I do have a website, charitygibson.com, and there is information about me and the project. Readers can buy the book there. The full title is The Working Homemaker: Employed Christian Moms Desiring a Thriving Home Life. This was a great way to spend my lunch break. Thank you for having me, Kim.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Book Therapy. Today we talked with Charity Gibson. This was part 2 of my interview with her, and we talked about her book, The Working Homemaker: Employed Christian Moms Desiring a Thriving Home Life. Once again, you can visit her website, charitygibson.com. She has a free gift for those who sign up for her email list, and also she has a blog where she posts essays about motherhood, career, faith, and everything else in between. I encourage you to get this book if you or someone you know is a working mama who just needs a little bit of validation and encouragement. This book is incredibly wise, and it will encourage you and also give you a very rich foundation for what a working mama's life looks like. This wraps up season 3. I will miss you guys so much, but I will see you back in the fall. Have a wonderful, wonderful summer. All my best to you and your family. And I want to go home and eat husband.
That wouldn't be good.
Oh, glory.